Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
Hey, thanks for joining us for this edition of Donnybrook. Let's see who's on the panel on this Washington birthday. Wendy Wiese, co-host of the Jennifer and Wendy Show on the Big 550 KTRS. Sarah Fenske, sitting in for Bill McClellan. Sarah is the executive editor of the Riverfront Times and sister publications and the host of the Legal Roundtable on St. Louis Public Radio. Ray Hartmann from the Riverfront Times. He founded that years ago. He's also on Substack, an all-around good guy, and a founder of Donnybrook. And sports columnist and news editor with your St. Louis American, who also not only was the host with the most last week, but emceed a great luncheon that the St. Louis American
I just made some
today.
remarks. I wasn't the MC, but I was, yeah.
Oh, well.
Really not was the MC. Right.
Oh, well, he does a great job,
yes,
too.
Yes, he does.
Okay, well, thank you for your help last week.
Right.
And Wendy, we're going to start with you because Beavis Schock is an attorney in St. Louis, and he is representing some homeowners whose property is near Spring and Cherokee, I believe, in South St. Louis. Do I have that right? Or is
yes.
Yeah,
no,
Spring
that's
and Cherokee.
Exactly where it is.
Well, anyway, there are a couple of Sudanese refugees who have unbelievably been living outside their house on the sidewalk for about 2 years, according to published reports. And the city hasn't done anything about it. They're living there. They use the local sewer for the restroom. They walk around nude, apparently. And Beavis says, let's get rid of them. I think this panel probably agrees that they don't have a right to live there, but how would you remove two human beings from a public sidewalk?
I think you remove them very carefully, and as awful as this might sound to some people, I think you're running the risk of a major public health problem for the people who live in the area. The bikers are not, the bikers, people have to navigate their way around this encampment. According to Mr. Schock, who has been interviewed by every media outlet, the stench is horrific. So to me, it's a public health issue. If you have to use tear gas, and I believe they would be very humane. You have to arrest them, and you have to not arrest them, whatever you have to do, you have to remove them from the site and then demolish the site, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think this one is very controversial. I mean, in terms of, you know,
everybody, yeah.
It's pretty obvious. It's a difficult situation. On one hand, give credit to the city. They've attempted to, you know, get this person to services, these people. But again, it kind of feeds back to the thing I might beating people over the head with. You've got to have more respect for neighbors and for the residents of the city. It should not have taken this long, and it should not take a lawsuit threat to get this done. As far as the logistics, I mean, it's just like removing trespassers or people of that, you know, that are just not where they're supposed to be. I don't think that's a major issue. I mean, the police can do it. I think a bigger issue is trying to get them, if necessary, forcibly to services where they can be welcome and so forth. It's not disparaging them, but we've got to have more. Residents shouldn't have to wait
but
2 years.
Decisiveness, I mean, I don't understand the hand-wringing.
Well,
I don't understand
okay,
the hand-wringing.
I can in a way. You used the word, forcibly. Okay.
Right.
Now, let's say the people who live there just raised that place, set everything on fire, told them get, you know, and maybe kind of physically ushered them on out. Then the homeowners are in trouble. All right, the city in the middle of the night raises the place, tells them to beat it. 24 hours later on social media, there'll be every kind of tale that they beat up the women and the kids and dragged them down the street, and you're like, no, that didn't happen, but it was cover of darkness, and you should have been more transparent, and blah, 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 blah. And 98 out of 100 people who were commenting on this had no idea that these people were living on this sidewalk, but the second they throw them out, now they got an opinion. Oh, that's so cruel. That's so terrible.
Well, we have to have leaders who are...
Wait, now I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Now, I was just going to say, now, I'm just throwing that out there because there comes a time, and if I were the mayor, there would be some times where I said, like, hey, blame me, kind of like Tommy Lee Jones in the Fugitive. Like, blame me, I shot him, right? So I would be that person where I said, not shoot him, but I'm just saying, like, I would literally say, like, no, just blame me. I had them thrown out.
But it could have been done 2 years ago. That's the problem.
What this all comes down to is that this country has a broken system of dealing with mental health issues where it's very hard to get somebody committed against their will. It's particularly hard here because there's a language barrier. And that's the source of this is a refugee couple who's gone through some apparently very traumatic stuff. It goes with the territory of being a refugee. Nobody wants to come in and be the bad guy. Beavis has now forced their hand. They're going to have to come in and be the bad guy. The question is there any way that, like, we can get these people the services that they need? The way that the laws are in this country, we'd be looking at, okay, maybe they can do 28 days in a hospital where they're going to be miserable. There's not a good answer here.
But they've already been offered housing by the city.
No, exactly.
And that's what the courts have said. The appeals court, I think the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said, you can remove a homeless person if you provide housing.
Right.
And there's no excuse, in my opinion, for the city to have dragged its feet this long.
I know, it's analysis paralysis, in my opinion.
Well, Ray, I want to ask you about another group, Democratic Socialists of St. Louis, are calling on, well, no.
Of course, go to me.
Well, they are asking Washington University to make payments in lieu of taxes.
Right.
Specifically, they want Washington University to provide money for electric vehicles, for ventilation for schools, as well as teachers.
Solar
for
panels.
Schools, solar panels in schools in University City and in the city of St. Louis. Of course, being a 501c3, Washington University doesn't have to pay sales taxes or property taxes. Now, Washington University does have about 15,000 students who each probably bring in $45,000 a year to the area, so there's that, which is only $675 million. I calculated that today. But, okay, what do you think? Does WashU owe the schools?
Well, I brought this up 3 weeks ago, I think it was, when my popular drive to support the Clayton School District, and made the point that everybody was wringing their hands about how Clayton was going to take 9 acres of property out of circulation or out of off the tax rolls, and said, why isn't anybody talking about WashU taking multiples of that? And we're talking now, the socialists are talking about the city and U-City, which is where you hear the most, but Clayton has a substantial amount of this as well. I don't know that it's going to help to have a group called the Democratic Socialists backing them into a corner. I don't know if that will work or not. But to answer your question, yeah, I think I'd like to look, and maybe we need to take a broader look at around the country to see how many instances there are, like I think Yale was cited in a story that where pilots are made. And I've raised the same thing about the soccer stadium, paying pilots into the St. Louis schools, and that's a good middle ground.
Okay, how about also the art museum, the history museum, the science center, every church, every synagogue, every piece of non-tax property?
Well, you mix in public institutions when you talk about the art museum and the
Actually, they are private, as you have well written.
Right. Well, yeah, but I mean, they're publicly funded.
We volunteer to
they're part
pay
of
the
this
tax for some of them.
district.
Now, you may not like that, but we did agree to do that.
Right.
Okay, so that, I think
Publicly
that takes
funded.
them out of that loop, okay?
Why? Well, I mean, they're on non-taxable property, and they're not paying any property taxes.
Yeah, but okay, put it this way. A substantial amount of money that goes to them actually does come from the people, and we could decide we're not going to do that anymore unless you do or something like that. So that's a little different. However, okay, how about we address these gigantic corporations that are getting a tax break? And like, okay, so if for now you're, a not-for-profit institution, okay, we'll leave you alone. But as soon as we get this straight we got to quit giving away the farm to these developers and things like that, then we'll move on to asking WashU. And in particular, okay, I'm not the devil sitting here, but churches and the cash flow, and a lot of it's cash, and people don't know. And I'm like, boy, if I'm WashU, I'm there like, well, what about our institutions of faith.
You're sure? Wait a minute. Are you sure you're not?
I understand everybody's trying to change the subject, but this is why the Democratic Socialists of America are the ones bringing this up, because WashU is like this third rail that no one wants to touch in this town because they're so powerful and they employ so many people that we all really like. I get that, but it's like they are an extraordinarily wealthy institution, and for the kids in U City to have to deal with some of the problems they're dealing with in that school district, and WashU not to want to voluntarily cough up some money to help that particular school district where they're taking money off the tax rolls, I think it's selfish.
If I may defend myself here, no, what I'm saying is take WashU off of it, okay, the name off. I'm just saying universities in general, like you said, all over the country, because you could say the same thing about universities everywhere, no matter how small, they're not paying, and you can't make WashU cough it up if you're not going to make 5 bars.
How about these are voluntary. They're not saying let's change the tax code to come after WashU. They're saying, hey, Fontbonne and Webster, those guys are in some trouble. But WashU, they're just printing money over
But
there.
that's the problem. You can't do that.
So arbitrary. I mean, it really is, and I understand what you're saying about it's not fair. But we're going to find this is going to be really fascinating because we're going to find out how progressives are.
Well, and also, I do agree that there's a certain. That's why I made the reference. I get hate mail now from socialists, but it's nothing new. But I mean,
some of them are smart.
My best friends are socialists. But the point is that I don't think strategically, to your point about arbitrary, that socialists telling WashU you should do this one is necessarily going to be a productive strategy. I do think it's worth looking at the broader picture of others like them in the country.
Today, coincidentally, happens to be the birthday of WashU. It became Washington University on this day, Washington's birthday in 1854.
It's a great institution.
170 years ago. Alvin, Reid, I want to ask you about Cara Spencer. She's a member of the Board of Aldermen in the city of St. Louis, and tomorrow she's going to introduce a measure a week or so after a couple of tourists from Chicago were killed in downtown St. Louis by a reckless driver. She says in her legislation that the reckless driver should lose his or her car on the spot, that police responding to the scene of the reckless driver's accident or whatever should put a boot on it and prevent that driver from driving further in that dangerous machine. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think that opens up too many levels of who gets to decide what's reckless driving. All right, I'm driving and I really did have to swerve and I hit a fire hydrant and water's shooting up in the air, so I get booted, but the next person comes along and they do something else and they don't get the car booted, and why me, not them?
Which raises the question, will police put boots on their own cars?
Well, right. And I'm telling you, it'll be, like, all of a sudden, like, it'll become about this car is nicer than that car. This person is different than that person.
Well,
it'll all just. I think it's a good thought, but it will not work.
I love it in theory, but I hate to bring up the obvious. I mean, how many repeat DWI offenders do we hear about? They could easily find a way to drive another car just as recklessly as they have been driving the one with the boot on it.
Yeah, beyond the due process concerns here, which I think are huge, I don't want the police to have the power to just be seizing things.
Yeah.
And can you imagine the city administrators properly then administering the return of the car? I mean, that in this city, that would end up being a nightmare. But even beyond that, sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
Well, how about this? Why not use boots more often? I mean, Ray, we're going to talk about a measure that Gretchen Bangert, state representative representing Florissant and Hazelwood, has put forward. And she says if you don't have if you don't have a license on your car or you have an expired tag, under her bill, you won't be able to get your car repaired at an auto repair shop. I'm thinking, why not put boots on cars that have expired tags like they do in New York City, that bastion of conservatives, Ray, and make sure that people have tags and licenses on their car.
I got not much to say. You stole my line about the cops, about how many cop cars are going to be booted. We're not going to have any. They can be a problem.
2 at least, we know.
Well, no, we're going to be a lot more than that. No, okay, first of all.
Because the mechanic, according to the legislator.
No, I think this is not a great idea for a lot of reasons. One, most people who, I happen to be law-abiding in this respect, but most people have cars on warranties that buy new cars. I think if anything out of this story comes out is that perhaps we ought to have the option for people to spread their payments for their sales tax out over a reasonable time. I think that would be a nice thing. You're not going to be able, I don't think, to tell mechanics who, you know, how are you going to enforce that with mechanics? Well, and also, like I say, I'm sure there was a reference in that story about $100,000 trucks and cars. Those people are not going to have a problem getting their cars fixed. And so it's just, it's,
so what?
I think she
But the whole point is, let's make sure
then there's the baby with the bathwater component here. And I think Gretchen Bangert in the article, she did point out that the problem, one of the problems is that even if you have, let's say you have a sick child and your license plates, you've done everything to date correctly, but if your license plates are expired 1 or 2 days and you need a catalytic converter, you're not going to get it. I mean, that's, I would like to see that resolved.
What is so difficult about getting license plates, St. Louis? I don't see this problem anywhere else in the country.
Let me give you an example.
Why don't we enforce the law?
Okay, earlier in my life, okay, there was a time, I went like a couple of months, what we used to call riding dirty, okay? But the tags were expired, all right? Because I had to get my brakes fixed, or else it was not going to pass inspection. I just knew this, and I had to write. So I said, I could send the girls to camp, I could get my brakes fixed. Okay, so I said, well, I'm all right. Smoke ain't coming off of them yet, but I can hear them grinding. All right, so finally, you know, it's time to get my brakes fixed. Well, what do I do if they won't fix them because my tag is expired?
And do we want to incentivize dads driving around with bad brakes?
With children in the car.
And also, Charlie, to your other point, one other point, there are tow lots, okay? If we want to have, you could have a car towed. Think about the amount of vandalism there will be on booted cars all over our community.
I don't think that's happening in New York.
Oh, no, that would never happen in St. Louis.
Here's what happens in New York. If your car is on the side of the road and doesn't have a license plate, they put a boot on it, and then you have to call an 800 number, give them your credit card, they give you the code to take the boot off. That's how it works.
Yeah, I don't see that working here. And I don't see that working. I want to go back to this. I appreciate that people are trying to be very serious about the reckless driving here. But let's face it, a lot of this reckless driving is actually stolen cars. So this is not going to help with that.
Well, that's true.
Okay.
That's true.
I want to go to you, Sarah, on a story that Jeremy Kohler, ProPublica, had this past week. He took a look once again at the way the chief in the city of St. Louis is reimbursed or compensated. He gets $175,000 from the city, and then the St. Louis Police Foundation, a not-for-profit, digs into its own pocketbook, its own wallet, and gives another $100,000. And some people are saying, without any evidence, that this is going to result in favoritism, that the police chief is going to be giving better police services to those who contributed. Do you have any problems with this arrangement?
Yeah, I think the ProPublica story raised some great questions. One of the things I hadn't been aware of until I read this story is that this is unprecedented. They looked all over the country, couldn't find anyone else doing that. Anytime St. Louis becomes an innovator in something, we're out ahead of other cities. Does make me a little bit nervous. But Sharon Tyus had a great quote in this story. She's always so quotable. She said, what if the criminals get together and try to, you know, hire a police chief? And while I get that that's absurd, I do think that whoever is paying part of your salary has your ear. We're all in workplace situations where we understand the people who are funding us can get to us and have an impact on how we do our jobs in ways that the person who's not paying our salary does not. So I can see these questions.
And I made that point when this first came. We talked about this some time ago, but there's some elements to the story that advanced it. One, which I hadn't really paid attention, I think I forgot, is that the fire chief has to be paid the same as the police by ordinance, which is a terrible idea, by the way, but it exists. And Dennis Jenkinson's like apparently still not working. The question is,
he's going to sue.
Does he get paid? Has he got an argument about the foundation part now that the other? And it also pointed out that city officials are acting like this is just a gift. The foundation wasn't involved directly. They have a contract with, and by the way, Chief Tracy is not the issue here.
No.
You can't blame him at all. Bob Tracy had nothing to do with this. He's the recipient. No issue with him at all.
Except he cashes the check.
But that's okay. No, that's not. It's not on him.
If you think that there's favoritism,
no, it's not on him.
If that's reality.
I didn't say that. I said
well, she did.
Well, we've set him up for a situation where we've made him the whole
Don't make him. This is not about Bob Tracy. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it could be. It just could be subtle. I thought that Jeremy did a terrific point. I mean, did a terrific job of pointing out that it is not only unprecedented, but I've also lost my train of thought.
Well, this is
something in the air tonight.
It's catchy.
No, wait, I want to say something.
No, you just lost your train of thought.
I did not. It's usually derailed, but it isn't here. The private sector in this town has consistently, don't tell me that there aren't issues about hirings and firings and this one and that one that don't matter to people in the private sector.
My train
this is
just
not the way.
back up on the track. He was making the point that for the first time in its history, we've gone outside of the city of St. Louis because apparently we didn't have a whole lot.
That never had happened before.
And that's what you need. Okay, almost every superintendent.
It was a great story.
The money should come from the city. Fine. But if the city's not going to give him $275, which is way too low, and that's what most superintendents make in this area, and we just found out that the athletic director at Mizzou, whose budget is much smaller than the police chief's, was making $1.25 million.
That's got nothing to do with it.
It does. Because they both work for the public, and he deserves to be compensated. His pay was way too low.
I don't have any problem with this whatsoever. Okay, and I also think the only thing it has to do with Bob Tracy is this: you're kind of impugning his character. No, I'm not saying you. I'm saying you're kind of impugning his character by saying like there'll be favoritism just because you're getting this money, and I'm not going to put that on him. I don't have a problem with it. But Charlie, like the highest paid public employee in the state is the football coach.
Always.
I got issues with that, but that didn't have anything to do with trying to get the best public employee.
And I don't think it does. It is not. By the way, it is not impugning Bob Tracy to say the structure lends itself.
No, it does.
The structure, not Bob
his
Tracy.
fault.
I said it. I don't think it's about him at all.
But you can't say it's not about you and say
first of all,
this
a lot of this money from the police foundation isn't even close to St. Louis. It comes from St. Charles, from St. Louis County, all these people. So they're not going to ever deal with this guy in any way. But also, some people are in downtown St. Louis, but there is no evidence, Sarah, that there is any increased police presence in downtown St. Louis, Missouri in 2024.
Former aldermen brought it up.
We know that St. Charles has ways they would like to see things change in St. Louis. And so they definitely have an agenda here to say that they don't have a dog in the hunt of how St. Louis is policed.
They want a quality police chief who's paid a decent salary.
Nobody, you know what?
We have.
It's on the city to do that. And again, I think one of the things we got to talk about is this fire department thing where you've got the same.
Sarah Fenske is going to talk about a story that she ran this week, written by Shula Newman, who took a look at the legacy of Charles Lindbergh, who almost 100 years ago was the first person to fly across the Atlantic solo in the spirit of St. Louis. And Ms. Newman thinks that we need to reconsider his legacy, like Lindbergh Boulevard, Lindbergh School District, the high school, etc.
Yeah, this was not an argument to cancel Lindbergh or remove his name from these things, but Shula Newman, writing for the St. Louis Jewish Light, which took the lead on this project, as well as the Riverfront Times, she did a really good job of saying, we have not probed this legacy. We have not questioned anti-Semitism in the United States and this dark history that Lindbergh was a part of. I have to say, as somebody who came along in the latter half of the 20th century.
Now you're just showing off.
I made myself sound younger than I am by accident. I was shocked to read about the restrictive covenants affecting Jews, about all the anti-Semitism that was very common in St. Louis and codified into colleges and clubs and all of these things. It's a forgotten history, and Shula made a great argument that that's something we need to be talking about, and we're not talking about.
Okay, and I know in the light of days, like, people wanted to discuss this, all that. I am not kidding you. I think I was 9 years old. But the first time it said, oh, yeah, Charles Lindbergh flew over there. And somebody said, he was a Nazi, don't you? And I'm kind of like...
He was not a Nazi.
I know. What I'm saying, Charlie, is in the late 1960s was someone actually said that to me. And so I'm like, it's almost like people are acting as though this just jumped out the closet.
No, 1941 he was pilloried in St. Louis.
But he was,
Then they quickly recovered and went back to being in favor of it.
Because he flew 50 combat missions in World War II. So he saved his reputation for the time being anyway, until it was found out
that he had multiple families.
He had 7 kids out of wedlock in Germany.
I think there are 2 things that, it was a heck of a story. I think it was Riverfront Times. I've always admired that paper. I thought it was very good.
1 minute ago.
The good story, but really good story. And the 2 things that jump out. One, this guy was a horrible person. I'm sorry, I don't care. He may not have been a Nazi. He due to the Nazis arrive. But the point is, he was a horrible guy, and he wasn't from St. Louis. And that's one of the things that in the story, he only lived here for like a year. And for us, and again, I don't think we need to rename stuff. It's too late. But to honor this guy as one of our, just because he put St. Louis on his airplane, he's not even from here. He was here for like a year, and just got a bunch of rich people to give him some money. Why are we so in love with this guy?
Sarah and I aren't from here either. We're from Cleveland.
Yeah, but and we name a lot of stuff for you.
Cleveland.
Brennan, Fenske.
Half of Moline Acres.
By the way, it's Kirkwood Road in Kirkwood.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Okay,
You guys are admirable.
let's go to the mailbag and see what people had to say about last week's program. If police departments across the country can't attract officers, St. Louis City should be the exception and exponentially increase the pay for the dangerous job it has become. That from John Shahida of South City. We also heard from Mike Schloman of Kirkwood, who wrote, "Yet another tragedy occurred to visitors of our city caused by an out-of-control driver, this time taking the lives of a mother and a daughter visiting from Chicago. There is only one issue the Rams settlement money should be spent on, and that is making this city a safer place." Catherine Glazer of Bridgeton wrote, "Thank you, Alvin Reid, for leading the discussion. You need to keep that job permanently. Charlie Brennan needs to retire from this job, too. I hate that smirk he always has on his face, and I can tell he thinks he's better than everyone else." Thank you, Catherine, for writing. You can write us care of 9 PBS, 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. Love those emails. Donnybrook at 9pbs.org. And on social media, use hashtag DonnybrookSTL. Call the 9 line, won't you, at 314-512-9094. And listen to us on your favorite podcast source, Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, and Google Play. Don't forget, April 13th, that's our next Donny Bash. We'd love for you to join us, and there is all the information you need. Oh, it's April 11th. I'm sorry. I think I make that mistake again and again. Anyway, it's 9pbs.org. I'm starting to agree with Catherine. I need to retire. So, thank you very much for joining us. We will see you next week at this time.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9 PBS.